Welcome back. I'm Austin Westfall, a live look at the White House. We've, of course, been following so many of these headlines closely. The Pentagon's acting inspector general announcing some news in relation to Signalgate today. They're saying that, and I'm talking about the inspector general, the Pentagon's acting inspector general, saying that he would review Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and his use of the Signal messaging app to convey plans for a military strike against Houthi militants in Yemen. The AP says the review will also look at other defense officials' use of the publicly available encrypted app, which is not able to handle classified material and is not a part of the Defense Department's secure communications network. We did get this statement in. This is from the DoD Inspector General. His name is Stephen Stebbins. He says, the purpose of this memorandum is to notify you that we are initiating the subject evaluation. We are conducting this evaluation in response to a March 26, 2025 letter I received from the chairman and ranking member of the Senate Armed Services Committee, requesting that I conduct an inquiry into recent public reporting on the Secretary of Defense's use of an unclassified commercially available messaging application to discuss information pertaining to military actions in Yemen in March. The objective of this evaluation is to determine the extent to which the Secretary of Defense and other DoD personnel complied with DoD policies and procedures for the use of a commercial messaging application for official business. Additionally, we will review compliance with classification and records retention requirements. We may revise the objective as the evaluation proceeds. So, this is under investigation by the DoD. Again, this is the Pentagon's acting inspector general that's going to be taking this up. National security analyst and host of the Strat podcast, Hal Kempfer, is here to discuss who is, and, you know, we actually just had his name up there and we've said his title a million times already. I guess what I'm trying to get to, Hal, is the Pentagon investigating himself?
Well, Austin, it's interesting. The acting inspector general, Stephen Stebbins, and I say acting because you may recall there was pretty much a house clearing of inspector generals, the inspector generals, the senior members throughout. When the Trump administration came in, a lot of the IGs throughout all the different departments were let go. And so there's been some changes in personnel within these organizations, some significant changes. He's now the, effectively acting as the inspector general, but he's not conducting, and this is where some of the headlines kind of got it wrong. They said he's doing an investigation, and it kind of made it sound like he was investigating the Secretary of Defense. He was doing what's called an evaluation, and there's a variety of different things that the inspector general can do. They can do audits, they can do investigations, and they can do everything in between. And so he's looking at what was being done with the use of Signal, this unclassified commercial messaging app, albeit encrypted, but not, permissible for discussion or for communication of classified information. He's evaluating how this was used. And if you look at the language in there, it wasn't just the Secretary of Defense. He was talking about other members of the Department of Defense. So he may be doing kind of a see how common this is throughout the Department of Defense. I would not be surprised if he may look elsewhere too, and maybe coordinating with other IGs and other departments to see how common this is. Use of Signal like this is. And, there's a lot of speculation. Will he zero in on the Secretary of Defense? Well, at the end of the day, the Inspector General for the Department of Defense works for the Secretary of Defense. That's where the IG process kind of breaks down sometimes. You see that's one of the weaknesses is the Inspector General is somebody's Inspector General. In this case, for the Department of Defense, it's the SecDef, the Secretary of Defense Inspector General. So if the SecDef himself is implicated, it does bring a question, which kind of goes to your comment, is he kind of inspecting himself? And one could make that argument that it's his organization that's investigating him, if you will. So with that, I think everybody has what I would call tampered expectations as far as what this is. And it's not an investigation. It's not a criminal investigation. It's not following all the rules that you do with a criminal investigation. Theoretically, if you find something, for example, dealing with misuse of classified material, there are investigative agencies or investigative elements of DoD that could come in, or because it is the senior person in the Department of Defense. Normally, something like this, they might go to another organization like the FBI, which has jurisdiction, and they would look at it. So far, Kash Patel has indicated that the FBI is not going to look at this. So he'd have to uncover, basically Stebbins would have to uncover something pretty profound to do that. And then, of course, the other issue is if he does find something and if he was to go to the FBI, could the Secretary of Defense fire him? Technically, yes, as could the president. They work at the pleasure of the president. So, there's potentially a lot of interesting routes that this could take.
So, as I mentioned at the top, Hal, Signal is a publicly available encrypted app. It's not able to handle classified material, and it is not part of the Defense Department's Secure Communications Network. I don't want to ask for too many tricks of the trade, but do we know how high-level people normally communicate with each other? There's got to be a way to instant message within the Secure Communications Network, correct?
There is, and it really depends on what you're doing. Within the government like this, and so many have brought this up, if you had with that particular chat group with those very senior level principals, as they call them, normally they would take a trip to the White House and go into the Situation Room, which is a very secure facility. You can talk pretty much to every level of classification in that room. I think you can talk to every level of classification in that room. And if someone needs to link in, they go to a facility. It can be done, for example, if they're on a government flight. The president, for example, can link in through Air Force One. There's other aircraft where they can link in. They can go to a U.S. embassy where there's secure facilities where they could link in, and they could essentially do like a virtual meeting with people in the room, and then people who couldn't make it to the room being virtually linked in. And that's very common. It's done all the time. I have done this with stuff where I literally was overseas and I was linked into, I would say, the highest level classifications on various things I was working on, and that was some time ago. So it's not difficult to do. However, from a practicality standpoint, ease of use, if you have a team that's overseas or something like that, and you're just trying to coordinate, like where are we going to dinner or something, you might want to use a certain level of encryption to avoid anybody intercepting your communications. And so you may want to avoid doing just regular messaging on your phone because of the fear and certainly the concern that China at some time ago had basically been able to hack all the iPhones and Android phones. So you could go to, say, WhatsApp, but WhatsApp also had some challenging issues in terms of encryption. Signal was by and large considered one of the more secure ways of doing it. Signal was often suggested. And I think CISA, which is the cybersecurity arm of the Department of Homeland Security, had said use CISA. So that's part of what the Inspector General will look at, which is what type of guidance was within the Department of Defense or within, the federal government for use of this phone. So it could be a very interesting evaluation or review, in so much as from everything I've seen, this was actually being pushed on government officials to use this in lieu of some other unclassified messaging capabilities.
Right now, we're looking at a live image on the tarmac there in Palm Beach, Florida, where we expect President Trump to deplane any moment now. Presumably, he's heading to his Florida home. One more question before we go, Hal. What questions do you have about Signalgate at this point? What do you hope is gleaned from this review, if you will, if anything is gleaned from it, or if you were doing the investigation yourself, what questions do you have?
Well, the questions I've had is what guidance did they have? I would look at the information itself, where it came from, at what was it classified when it got to the Secretary of Defense. What was the level of classification? I would also be looking, depending on the scope of my investigation, at everybody else that was on that chat room. And one of the things, the headline today, and I don't know if it's, it's one of those things you kind of look at and you go, that's definitely enough to review. There are reports that Mike Waltz, the National Security Advisor, was using these Signal chat rooms for not just this one operation or this one project, but for a variety of other things. I think at one point I read that he may have been involved with 20 different chat rooms with various different things dealing with different geographic areas of the world and stuff. And certainly that would be something that I would be curious about. And of course, if those chat rooms also included the Secretary of Defense or any other member of the Department of Defense, that would be certainly well within the scope of, say, review or evaluation by the Inspector General to say, okay, well, what were they talking about in these other chat rooms as well? Was there any compromise of classified information? And then, for example, they'd also look at for official use only, things that fall into it may not be classified, but it's operational security issues, a whole host of things. And so this review could turn up a number of things. It may not be a smoking gun, so to speak, on whatever the Secretary of Defense did, but it could find that that there was a problem with the use of Signal chat or Signal app chat, and maybe even some other unclassified commercial apps or chat rooms for communicating stuff that just simply should not have been said in that environment. One thing I would just like to leave with this: it has been brought up many times. Why don't we have a classified app system for phones? Why don't we have something where they can go and do this very easily? That's a good question. And hopefully they'll come up with a recommendation from that.
We just saw the president get into the beast there in southern Florida. We presume he's headed to Mar-a-Lago. We'll give the viewers any updates as the night progresses. Hal, as always, good to see you, and I'll see you later this weekend on the Strat Podcast.
I will. We have much to discuss. Yeah. So, and of course, for anybody who doesn't know, both of us will be on that podcast this weekend. So
it's going to be happening. That's for sure.
I think it'll be the best Strat podcast we have had this whole week.
I think it'll more than likely it'll be the best one that any LiveNOW anchor has been a part of. Let's put it that way. That's for sure.
Ooh. Okay.
Shots at Andrew Kraft.
I'll tell you. All right. Okay.
See you soon.
I'll see you soon.